Hello everyone and welcome to a new developer's diary. In this video, as well as giving a quick update on the Symphony of the Night project, I'm also going to take the opportunity to answer some frequently asked questions both about the project and about the channel in general. What you're seeing on the screen now is the intro to the game that I created way back in one of my very first videos on the channel, because today we're going to take a look at a new updated version of the intro as well as a few other things. First of all though, I just want to talk a little bit about the general direction of the channel and what I'm trying to achieve and do with it. It's been almost 2 years now since I put up those first GG Shinobi and Symphony of the Night videos, and right from the start I called my channel PC Retro Game Dev Tutorials because I always intended in the future to have some tutorials to teach other people how to make Mega Drive games. For me these days, if I want to learn anything, one of the first places I look is YouTube, because whether it's learning how to cook something or play a song on my guitar or anything else, there's normally so much content that you can look on YouTube to learn how to do anything you could wish to do. So when I decided I wanted to start learning how to make Mega Drive games, it was natural for me to search on YouTube for any tutorials, but unfortunately there weren't any. Even on the internet as a whole, there really isn't a lot out there in terms of tutorials or learning how to do even the most basic stuff on HDDK, and a lot of what is out there is scattered in different places, so you have to really search out the information, as well as often using outdated versions of HDDK and so on. Over the past 10 or 20 years, of course, there have been many people who have done some amazing things in making Mega Drive development much easier and accessible to more people, not least Steph, who created HDDK, and everyone else who's contributed to the tools over the years, so these tutorials are meant to be my own little contribution to that process. I always thought if I could just get 100 new people into Mega Drive game development, then that would be a really good result, because although 100 doesn't sound like a big number, especially when you're thinking about a AAA game, when it comes to these 16-bit games, 100 new developers who can actually program Mega Drive games would actually be huge, because often it only takes 1 or 2 developers to create a single game. So if we could get like 100 new people into the hobby, then that would be great. So even if you're not personally interested in studying how to make games yourself, having these tutorials available and having more and more people studying them is actually good news, because it means that there'll be more great games for us to play in the future. Of course, to make good games you need good game designers, good artists, good musicians and so on, but from looking at the history of home dev games over the past few years, it does seem to be that it's the programmers which are lacking the most, the people who actually know how to make the games. So, and that causes lots of projects maybe to stop or to fail or so on. So I think the more people we can get into the hobby, the better. And since the playlist itself has over 25,000 views now, and that each individual lesson has got between 1 and 10,000 views, depending on how old it is, hopefully we're not too far off that 100 number who are really sticking at it and will eventually become full-blown Mega Drive developers as a hobby. I've already had people contact me with the various projects they're doing, so I know there's lots of talented people who are involved in making new games, so hopefully we'll see some good stuff in the future. Now of course I'm not only doing tutorials on this channel, I also have my 2 projects, the GG Shinobi and the Symphony of the Night game. So to answer one frequently asked question, is yes, GG Shinobi, I will do it eventually. That's on the back burner at the moment because there's just so many other things to do, but once Symphony of the Night is in a more advanced state, then I will go back to that and start working on that again too. And with what I've learned from Symphony of the Night, from developing that game, and the fact that of course being an 8-bit title, is the scope is so much smaller than Symphony of the Night, then hopefully that would seem quite easy in comparison when I do go back to it, and I can do some work on the graphics myself. But actually I think I might have 1 or 2 people willing to help with the graphics, so if we can get the graphics up to the standard of say Revenge of Shinobi or even Shinobi 3 maybe, then that will be just perfect. So and in the meantime of course I'll link the playlist for the songs that Aliana's already done the soundtrack for the entire game, so in the meantime you can listen to those great tracks. When it comes to the Symphony of the Night project, it goes without saying that of course that's still going ahead, and I think that some people, when they see week after week of tutorials, they get a bit panicked and they think, oh no, has he got bored of it or abandoned the project? But I can assure you that that's not the case. And of course when people know that this is an ongoing project, the next question is a very obvious one, and that is, when will the project be finished? When will people be able to play an actually completed copy? The honest answer to that is I don't know, because I've never actually made a game from start to completion before, so anything I could give would only be a guess. In those 2 videos that I posted at the start of my channel, the GG Shinobi and the Symphony of the Night one, I think I made it clear that I was a complete newbie to this. I'd never made a game before, no game development experience, and I had very little coding experience, just a tiny bit of Python. So for me it's been a very steep learning curve learning how to program in C as well as make Mega Drive games. And as I said earlier in the video, there really aren't many resources available to learn how to use SGDK, how to do even some simple things. So it's really about trial and error and just trying stuff out and seeing how it works. So the learning curve is really steep, but I think that looking at what I've learned so far and what I need to learn, I think most of the stuff I need to learn to make the game, I've got a good grasp on it. I feel that that's okay. So hopefully in the future, I think the speed of development should start to pick up, the pace should start to pick up, because hopefully it should be a case of now of just putting levels together, trying different enemy AIs and so on. And I don't think there's too much more I need to learn to make the basic game, although I'm sure I'll be proven wrong and there'll be some bugs that I have to fix or other stuff that comes up. But for the moment, in terms of handling the memory, the RAM, the VRAM, which of course is very small on the Mega Drive, and write my C coding abilities, I feel much more confident now that I can just write what I need to and also solve any problems that might come up. So I'm feeling more and more confident that the pace of the worst of it in terms of learning is over. I've really learned most of what I need to learn, so hopefully things will pick up pace in the future. All that said, I think for every one person who says, hey, come on, get a move on, hurry up and get this thing completed, there are at least 10 people who say, hey, take your time, we're here as long as you need, don't rush things. And I think what they're most worried about is the dreaded B word, and that is burnout. Now, this is a fear I can understand, because long before I was a game developer, I was of course a fan of these homebrew games and ports and so on. And for me, I've had many experiences of having projects that I've been following and really looking forward to on the Mega Drive and other consoles too, and follow them along, and then eventually there's just no news for them, and months pass by, maybe years, and it seems like the project's gone dead. And so I understand the disappointment when a project you've really been following is just suddenly stops. And so from the beginning I've really determined to try and have a good think about how you avoid burnout and how you make sure that things work in the long term. I can understand that people look at me and they can see I've got Symphony of the Night, I've got GG Shinobi, I've got the tutorials, I've also got the Chinese version of my channel over on Bilibili too, and of course I have work and other hobbies too, guitar and gym and so on, and so it's a lot to balance out. But I just want to talk a bit about how I plan to avoid burnout and why I think that me burning out is very unlikely. I think I've got a good plan. First of all, I have a lot of passion for all the little projects I'm doing, so that's an important thing. But of course, passion isn't enough, because I think in the long term, passion kind of wanes and flows a bit, it goes up and down. But the most important thing I think is habit. So just like if you want to go to the gym, it's kind of like a habit you have to cultivate, rather than getting super enthusiastic in, say, January, and by February or March most people have quit. It's something you just got to make part of your regular everyday life. And for me, that's what programming on the Mega Drive has become, and also just doing the tutorials and making the videos too. So it's just something I just naturally do, hope not necessarily every day, but a few times a week, and it's just a fun, relaxing thing. And so I think I've got into the habit of just programming, making games, working on the games. So I think that's the most important thing, that you establish a habit. Another important thing I think is to not give yourself too many super tight deadlines. So that's one of the reasons, the main reason why I'm not going to give an estimated date or when I think it'll be finished, because it'll just be putting pressure on myself. And I think lots of people, they kind of work themselves too hard, which is after all a hobby. It's supposed to be a fun thing, although just like learning, practicing the guitar and so on, it requires a lot of grinding. You just have to accept the grind, but you need to not give yourself too tight deadlines. It still needs to be fun to a certain degree. So that's one of the reasons I'm not giving myself a deadline now, when I've got to take the attitude as that I'm going to continue to work on it, and when it's finished, it's finished, and hopefully that won't take too long. The rather childish image you're seeing on screen right now is what I like to call my anti-burnout schedule. So this is the plan, the schedule I think I need to follow with the channel and with all the other projects, just to make sure everything's balanced and make sure I don't burn out with anything. So as you can see, in February, March, April, I really want to focus on the tutorials, putting them all together, putting the lessons plans together, filming them and editing the videos and getting them all published. And then after that, because after dealing with the tutorials for so long and video editor, and I feel that now, I feel a bit kind of fed up with doing all the video editing, but I'm really enthusiastic to get back to my project. So from May, June, July, August and September is a time I want just for programming only, just working on the games without thinking about having to make a video. And I'm really happy getting back to Symphony of the Night and being able to just program and listen to music as I do it. It's very relaxing, and I don't feel I need to make any kind of updates after this one until maybe the end of October, around Halloween time. And of course by then it would have been a few weeks and months since I did any videos, so I'll be really enthusiastic to go back into making videos again, which I enjoy. And then I'll of course be very excited to share with all the progress I've made on the games, fingers crossed. Then in late December, just before Christmas, I'll share the ROMs as usual, and then at the end of the year I have my new games in development video where I highlight all the work other people are doing on the Mega Drive. And then after that there'll be a 1 month break in January, and then the whole process will repeat. So with this schedule I think this is maintainable, I can continue it. I think it lets my batteries be recharged, so after working on the project from May till December I'll probably be a bit tired of that, and it'd be nice to have a month break and do the tutorials for a while, and I'll be really enthusiastic to do the tutorials. After 3 months doing the tutorials I'll probably need a break from the tutorials and go back to the projects I'm working on. So I think it's a good kind of back and forth. I think it helped my batteries be recharged for different things, so it's good to have a little break from things, and I think this is something I can keep up. Okay, thanks for all your patience in listening to that. I hope everyone's clear on what's happening to the channel, both now and in the future too. So let's have a look at Symphony of the Night now and look at the latest updates. When I went back to do a little bit more work on the intro sequence a few weeks ago, I found this art book which has some really beautiful art for Symphony of the Night, most of which, if I'm not mistaken, didn't appear in either the PlayStation or the SotN version at all. It's just for this art book, and looking at all these beautiful images I thought it might be a good idea to see how any of these would look in the actual intro, rather than just having the castle slowly rising up next to the moon. It might be nice to add some other images too. So I wanted to maybe downscale these and see how they look on the Mega Drive. I also decided to get rid of that rather ugly just standard font that we had for the writing in the original intro, and replace it with the letters, the fonts and the letters from the original game. So I took these from the original and I had to do them one by one and recolor them. So you can see we're using the Mega Drive grayscale here, and which isn't very much. We've got 6 grays plus black and white. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the new prototype for the intro, and before I do so I just want to say that the graphics here is just a placeholders that I'll put in very quickly. Of course, if we do go ahead with this kind of style, then we will sort out the colours and I'll hand over to Pyron. But Pyron himself actually has some different ideas of what we could do for the intro, and we'll talk about them afterwards. Although the quick 30-second rush job I did on each image to get them downscaled and reduced in colour obviously looks really rough, I think you can get the general idea of what I'm going for with the intro just from this little prototype. While of course these graphics would look a lot better if I were to give them to Pyron and let him have time to use the full 61 colours and go for it really carefully, the images from the art book itself may not be the best match for the Mega Drive's hardware for the resolution and the colours. Because of that, Pyron sent me this image which he converted the colours himself as an example of what kind of thing we could do instead. The person who created this original artwork is a pixel artist by the name of Valeria Kim. I will include a link to her website here so you can check out her other artwork, which is all fantastic. You can see here there's not just Castlevania stuff but lots of other different types of pixel art too. And I especially like this pixel art of the main character Miriam from Bloodstained. The original artwork of Alucard here has quite a few colours, but Pyron's reduced them to just 16, and I think that even though we could theoretically use 61, I think the 16 colour version looks great already. Neither myself nor Pyron has had any kind of contact with the pixel artist. It's just something that we found online and we thought it'd be a good idea just to prototype it and see what it looks, to see what could be possible on the Mega Drive. I can already see that right now Valeria looks very busy with a fantastic looking game called Last Ditch Effort, so I won't bother her right now with my little fan game. Maybe at the end of next year I can speak to her and see if we can arrange something, but whatever happens I'm sure we can get a very nice intro going, but in the meantime you can enjoy this fantastic pixel art. Returning to the game itself, let me show you what I've been up to since I finished the tutorials a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure this room is very familiar to most of you. It's not the most exciting room in the game, but it's a room that you pass through back and forth quite a lot, and in the Mega Drive version of course then we don't really need these kind of loading rooms, but I thought it'd be good to include anyway. And as you can probably guess here, this is what I'm using as a resolution select screen almost. So when you start the game, it asks you which resolution you want. If you walk to the left it's 256, if you walk to the right it's 320. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think there's a Mega Drive game out there which gives you the option of resolutions. It just decides the resolution for you, so I think it's a nice little feature to include. I'm going to walk to the left and choose the 256 resolution because I haven't really tested that so much so far, so I want to see if it all works okay. And just so that you know, obviously this graphics is a placeholder I made. I'm sure it'll look a lot better in the final version. And for now I've done the controls, so when you press start that's when it takes you to the next room. I won't spend too much time here because you've already seen this room before, only to say that you might notice that Alucard's a bit different. He hasn't got the blue outline around him, so this is the original Alucard sprite. Let me know which one you prefer. I think I'll keep the blue outline Alucard for when he's maybe powered up, and keep this for the regular sprite, but let me know what you think. This next room is quite a bit different from in the original game. You can see it's pretty rough looking at the moment, it's just a work in progress. In the original, this area of the castle is a little bit strange in that it's split into 3 different areas with a little loading in between, and those loading happens pretty much in mid-air. But I really like these columns, and I thought a lot more could be done with them in a single screen, and obviously a single screen would be much more suitable for this kind of action game than for a Castlevania like the original is. And you can observe the first draft of the new design here, although of course this is subject to change. As Alucard walks to the right and moves up the stairs, I want to see if you can notice anything, and as he's walking up here, if he gets to the top, something else is going to change. And I think it's even more obvious when you walk down the stairs. As you've no doubt guessed, I've managed to implement different walking speeds depending on whether Alucard is walking up the stairs, down the stairs, or on flat ground. This was pretty easy to put into the code because after all, for the purposes of the collision detection, I already know which kind of tile Alucard is standing on, whether it's a solid tile or whether it's the air tile or whether it's some type of stairs, and I know whether he's moving left or right, and I can use that information to then create some logical if and else statements to see, depending on whether he's walking left and right and what kind of tile he's standing on, how fast the walking speeds should be. I did however experience a very strange bug where when I put the tile collision type within the if statement to see whether it's stairs or flat ground, the if statement wasn't recognizing it. The solution to this was to create another variable and simply make that variable equal to the tile collision variable at Alucard's feet, and put that into the if else statements, and then it recognized it. So I asked a few people about this, whether they knew why this was happening, because logically speaking these 2 variables are equal, so it shouldn't matter which one's put into it. So even though it's not the most elegant solution, I managed to fix it, but I'm curious to know if anyone's a C expert out there. If you could let me know what you think might be going on, I'd be interested to know. Now what you're seeing here isn't a bug. I actually made those spaces to a solid tile because I wanted to test the jumping, and as you can see here, I think I've made the ceiling too low so Edelgard hits the head, so this jump would otherwise be very difficult to make. So I think I need to raise the ceiling and then make those solid tiles in between the platforms as regular air tiles so Edelgard can actually fall through it. I'm going to do a lot more work on this particular part, but I think the general idea is what I'm going to keep, but we'll put a few enemies in there and see what it's like. I've already featured this room in a previous video, so I won't talk too much about it, but what I want to talk about here is the jumping for Edelgard. So as you can see here, I've actually done variable jumping depending on how long you hold the C button, and I've just been doing some experiments with this, so I have to do lots of trial and error and playing the PlayStation one and the Mega Drive one side by side, because there are lots of different factors to take into account. You have the gravity in the game is one, you have the initial jumping speed of Edelgard, you have the terminal velocity, and you also have the extra little bit of jumping velocity that happens when you hold down the C button for a certain amount of time, and you have to decide how long you want to hold that down before you get the extra upward velocity. And of course I'm going to pretty much have Edelgard keep jumping and falling down in this section, compare it to the PlayStation one, and keep tweaking these values until I think I've got it just right. And you'll probably notice here that there's also a bit of a problem with the falling animation. It kind of repeats when it shouldn't repeat, but I can sort that out a bit later. In this section I pretty much copied the level layout of the PlayStation version, but you can also see that there's still some tiles missing because it's still a work in progress. Due to this area having lots of slopes and stairs and lots of tight spaces that the player could possibly get stuck in, I think it's a very good test of the new collision code that I've written. And if you who played the ROMs I released at Christmas know how janky the collision code I had at the time is, so it was really a big priority for me to, when I finished the tutorial, to really get the really go back to the collision code and get it working nice. And you can see on the screen here these two numbers. The bottom number where Edelgard was just slashing his sword is actually the collision tile he's currently standing on. So when he's standing on a solid tile it's 1, when he jumps up it turns to 0 because that's the collision tiles for the air, and as he walks up the stairs you see it changes to 4. Here is a graphical representation of the collision matrix that I have for this section. So you can see that the black tiles represent tiles that the character can 3D move through. The red tiles are solid tiles for the walls and the ceilings and the ground and so on. The green tiles are stairs going up to the left. The yellow tiles are stairs going up to the right. The blue and the white tiles are special tiles. The blue tiles, the purpose of those is to push the player up into the stairs tiles so that the stairs tiles, the yellow and the green ones, can do their stairs coding thing. And the white tiles at the very top of the stairs is to stop the character from getting stuck at the top. I won't go into too much more detail here. I'll save that when hopefully I can do a tutorials on slopes collision sometime next year. If you keep an eye on the number here, you can see it's number 4 on the stairs, so that's the green tiles, and as he walks up to the top you'll see it change briefly to 11, which is the white tile at the top of the stairs, and as he walks further left then it will turn into 1 again, which is of course the regular solid tile, and it will be 0 when he jumps up into the air. So I hope that gives a bit of an idea of how the collision works, but the most important thing for everyone to see is that you can see that it's actually going up and down the stairs, seems very smooth. I can jump at any point on the stairs. Obviously I need to change the jumping velocity and work that, but the actual collision detection's working very well now. So for the first time I'm actually finally confident that the code I've written doesn't feel janky, it feels quite nice. And as soon as I've got the animation sorted out and also the change the various speeds of the jumping and velocity and gravity and so on, I think it'll really start to feel like how Edelgard is in the original game. I won't spend too much time in the next room because you've seen it already. Obviously I need to put the animations back into the level because I need to integrate them into the bigger data structure, the level structure that I've done for this new build of the game, but I'll put that in soon. This next section is new, is the clock room, and this is very important in the original game, and in my version of the game this will be the location of the sub boss for the marble gallery area. The marble gallery doesn't have any boss fights unless you include the secret area, so I've had to choose 2 bosses from other parts of the game, but I think they fit quite well and I'm looking forward to showing them to you in a future video. For the next few sections you'll see that we don't have the Mega Drive graphics yet, so at the moment I'm using placeholders. Now in the past normally Pyron would send me some graphics through, then I'll start putting the levels together, but now I think I can prototype the levels quite quickly and I want to experiment and try different level layouts and section layouts. So I think in future what I'll do is I'll do what you're seeing here, creating essentially a ZX Spectrum version of the game, just with super low color, but just to test out that the VRAM requirements are okay, that all the tiles are fitting into VRAM, and just testing out different enemies, so I know which enemies are going to appear in which sections, which is of course is important in terms of selecting which kind of palettes you're going to use. And then once I'm satisfied that a level looks okay and it's playing okay, at that point I can then speak to Pyron and have him do the Mega Drive version of all the tiles, and then I can put these tiles into the game, and then we'll have the Mega Drive version. Something else which is missing from the Marble Gallery at the moment is of course the music. I think that everyone watching this probably already knows that a few weeks back, Savage Regime produced a really great version of this track for the Mega Drive. Since then, a lot of people have been asking me whether or not that track will be included in this version of the game. I've been a big fan of Savage Regime and his music for a long time now, and in many ways he'll be an obvious choice if you wanted to have any kind of new Symphony of the Night style music for the console. Long-term viewers of the channel will probably already be aware that we already have a handful of musicians working on the soundtrack, and at the beginning, in order to avoid any confusion, I pretty much let everyone choose which tracks they wanted to do, just to avoid any awkward situations where two people end up producing the same track and then we'd have to choose between which one to take. And Marble Gallery is one of those tracks which has been allocated to someone, as of all the tracks in the game already. Now that track hasn't been produced yet, and of course people they get busy with other things in life, so I'm not sure if the person originally allocated that Marble Gallery track will be able to do it in the end. And if it turns out they can't do it, then of course it would be an option for me to try and contact Savage Regime and ask whether or not he'll be interested and let us just use this version of the track. But so there's a lot of ifs. First of all, we have to make sure that the person who is allocated to definitely can't do it, so I'm sure they'll do a great job if they were to do it anyway. And then if that's the case, then I'd have to ask whether or not Savage Regime would be willing to let his version be in the game or not. So that's two big ifs, and if those both work out, then maybe in the future it could be included, but it's too early to say right now. I'm just going to finish off the video by answering a couple more frequently asked questions. In terms of the updates for Castlevania, that's it for now. As I said earlier in the video, I've got a schedule where I think I'll start uploading video, because again, maybe at the end of October around Halloween time, but rest assured I'll be hard at work on the game up until then, so hopefully I have some good things to show by that time. One of the most common questions I get is whether or not I'll be producing like a 32X version, a Mega CD version, a Super Nintendo version, and so on, and why I chose the Mega Drive. Now, two main reasons. One of them is that I have special affection for the Mega Drive. I really love the console, so that's a big factor. And second main reason is that compared to those other consoles I just mentioned and those extensions and add-ons, it's actually much easier to program for. It's already got a good development kit in place, unlike the Super Nintendo 32X and Mega CD. So I think it's unlikely that I'll be producing games for those systems for this game or any point in the future. After the Mega Drive, I'll probably move on to the SotN and then the Dreamcast, so that's kind of my plan for the future. Although, Super Nintendo and 32X and Mega CD games, I hope there are more in the future. And as you can see here from this Super Nintendo shooter by Cooler Research Labs, which I'll link to in the description below, they have some very impressive stuff, so I look forward to seeing what people produce for those particular consoles and add-ons in the future. But for me personally, I won't be producing games for them myself. While I'll answer the last few questions, I'm just going to play this footage from some of my experiments programming for the Sega SotN. So I'm not doing any serious projects on this console at the moment, just fooling around every now and again. A common question that people ask is how big the ROM size will be in the end, and to be honest, I don't know. It depends on how big it ends up being. The biggest, the stuff that takes up the biggest space at the moment is definitely the music. For some games which are released, they kind of share instruments between the music, but that's unfortunately not possible how we got it here, because we've got lots of different musicians working together and so on, and the actual sharing instruments between different music tracks is not included in SGDK. It's something you have to program yourself, and I don't know how to do that yet, so I think the ROM will end up being very big. Initially I wanted to keep it under 4 megabytes, because after all, some of the best Mega Drive games are only 1 megabyte big, for example Shinobi 3 and Bloodlines, so I thought, okay, 4 times that should be more than enough. And for the graphics and so on, it probably would be enough, but I said the music files are quite big, so it'll probably end up being a lot bigger than that. Thankfully SGDK, as I understand it, includes some kind of extra stuff that you can do it, so you can do some, I think it's called ROM mapping, that you can add extra capacity so it can be a lot bigger than 4 megabytes, so I don't think it'll be a problem in the future. He would also ask whether or not I'll be producing a cartridge and selling the game once it's finished, and the answer to that is no, because obviously it's not my IP, it belongs to Konami. This is a fan-made game, so whatever I end up producing for the game, I'll just release for free on ROMs, and then people can play that on their flash card on their Mega Drives or in an emulator. Okay, I think that's just about it in terms of frequently asked questions, but if you do have any questions you want answers to, then feel free to write them in the comments below. I will leave you one final Sega Saturn demo, and I look forward to seeing everyone again around late October time. And until then,
farewell.